Honda was an ugly, disgusting, worthless loser. Or at least, that's what his dumbass self believed. In reality, every single useless sod in his class low-key admired him. But Honda? Nah, he was too busy living in his delusional emo world. So, when he opened his locker that fateful day and a letter fell out, did he think, "Oh wow, someone finally appreciates me"? Hell no! His brain immediately went, "Ah yes, another death threat, just like middle school, classic." Without even reading it, he crumpled that thing like last week's homework and yeeted it into the bin. Before he could make his grand, tragic exit, he was stopped by an ugly girl with a massive head. Seriously, her skull had its own gravitational pull, named Jury. She called him a jerk for throwing away a love letter that her friend, Moo, had spent all night writing. But Honda wasn't listening. He was too busy assuming that Moo wanted to throw hands. Since he had nothing better to do, Honda asked what the hell they wanted from him. To his surprise, Minecraft nervously told him to meet her behind the gym after school. And that's when his overactive imagination kicked in. He started brainstorming all the possible ways he could get his arse handed to him by sundown. To distract himself from his impending doom, he decided to do some artwork in class. But of course, his teacher caught him and instead of minding his own damn business, called Honda to the front to solve some ridiculously complex maths problem. Because Honda was apparently built differently, he just grabbed his paintbrush, wrote down the correct answer without thinking, and sat back down like a boss. Meanwhile, Jury caught him staring at her and immediately assumed, because she's as dense as a brick, that he wanted her to give him the Gawk Gawk 3000 with her enormous head. But she wasn't about to betray Moo over a dude, or so she thought. Then, without a word, Honda casually dropped a letter on her desk. And that's when Jury's whole body went into meltdown mode. She was shaking, glowing, and possibly about to ascend to another dimension. Her brain, now running on fumes, convinced her that Honda was actually in love with her. Later that day, Moo came to their class to have lunch with Jury. But as soon as she started bragging about being the prettiest girl in school, Jury snapped. In her mind, a new mission had formed. Steal Honda away from this smug cow. By the time school was almost over, Honda was stressing. He still hadn't figured out how to face Moo and was strongly considering skipping town. But the entire school had basically formed a spectator crowd behind the gym, waiting for the showdown. With no escape, Honda slung his bag over his shoulder and strutted outside like a man accepting his fate. Jury wasted no time, demanding that he stop playing dumb. Moo stepped up to hand Honda another love letter, but before she could, Jury smacked it right out of her hands. Accident? Yeah, sure. Except she kept doing it, over and over, until eventually she straight up chokeholds Moo while Honda stood there, utterly confused. Jury, now fully off the rails, told Honda to stay away from Moo, calling her a cute menace with a black heart, which honestly sounds like a great album name. She then claimed Moo didn't deserve him because her head was literally shaped like a Lego brick. Honda, already fed up with this absolute clownery, had no idea what she was on about. So, Jury did the logical thing. She pinned Moo to the ground and started humping her in random positions to prove a point. What point? Who knows? Honda sure as hell didn't. Finally, she told Honda to forget about them and move on with his life. And Honda? He was so done. Without a single word, he just turned around and left like a main character walking away from an explosion. But before going, he dropped a wisdom bomb on them. Cherish your friendship over dumb drama. Moo, still desperate, tried to make him read her letter, but Honda just hit her with the coldest line ever. Write to Santa instead. Maybe he'll get you a bigger cup size. Moo was left crying until the sun went down, and Jury, finally feeling bad, suggested they work together to write a love letter so good that Honda couldn't resist. It was time to elect a new class rep. For the past 10 years, Isawa had held the position, and he was absolutely certain he'd win again. But Honda, fresh off his newfound popularity, was also nominated. Isawa was livid. What the hell did this walking social disaster want with his throne? Honda, meanwhile, was convinced this was yet another plot to ruin his life. But he played along, secretly hoping Isawa would just destroy him in the vote. When the results came in, a tie. Of course. So the teacher, in all his wisdom, suggested they break the tie with rock, paper, scissors. Isawa was furious. His prestigious title was about to be decided by a children's game. But since the class was cool with it, he had no choice. Honda, ever the enigma, straight up told Isawa, "I'm throwing rock every time." The class gasped. Was this a bluff? A double bluff? A triple bluff? Isawa was sweating. First round, Honda threw rock. Isawa lost. Desperate, Isawa begged for a rematch like a toddler who dropped his ice cream. The teacher, feeling generous, allowed it. Final round. One last throw to determine the winner. Isawa, overthinking like his life depended on it, over-strategized himself into oblivion, and lost. Honda, now class rep, was convinced Isawa had bamboozled him into taking this crap job. He immediately tried to resign, claiming he had better things to do. But Isawa wasn't having it. "You can't just quit like that," he yelled. Honda turned to him, deadpan, and hit him with the coldest response, "Get a life." Then, like a legend, he just walked out of the classroom, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Although everyone thought he was being disrespectful, Isawa, the absolute legend that he is, stood up for Honda, saying that his so-called rude actions had actually just schooled him on the true meaning of leadership. Inspired by this epiphany, Isawa decided to hand the class rep title back to Honda. But when our boy Honda returned and saw his name written on the chalkboard, he absolutely lost it. His first thought? They all hate me. Classic overthinker move. But Isawa quickly reassured him, explaining that he was the one who had stepped down voluntarily and that Honda had nothing to worry about. In fact, he was still willing to do all the work, even without the fancy title. What a king. Meanwhile, just outside the classroom, chaos was brewing. Why? Because a new student had arrived. Enter Rio, the long-haired, glass-skinned, magazine cover-worthy teen model. With a smile that could sell out entire skincare brands, Rio had been the hottest guy in school, until Honda, the mysterious shut-in with zero fashion sense, somehow overtook him in popularity. Determined to settle this injustice, Rio turned to the ladies and asked them the ultimate question. Who's hotter, me or Honda? The verdict? Well, you're prettier, but Honda is way more attractive because of his mysterious and gentle aura. Devastated. Absolutely annihilated. Furious at the betrayal, Rio made it his mission to stalk, observe Honda all day and uncover his secret. But all he discovered was that Honda had an intense, borderline obsessive love for street cats. Even weirder, when they ended up in a market, a group of undercover modeling agents were lurking about, searching for fresh talent. Not about to let Honda steal his actual job, Rio leapt in to block the agents, only to get slapped across the face by one of them. Savage. The agent then approached Honda, handing him a jacket and offering him a modeling contract, claiming it would make him the most famous person on the planet. Honda, creeped out by the dude's undeniably dodgy energy, declined in the most Honda way possible, by wrapping the jacket around Rio and saying, "Poor, homeless street boys deserve fancy clothes too." Absolutely obliterated by this unexpected act of kindness, Rio had a full-blown existential crisis. And just like that, he quit modeling to follow in the footsteps of the only man who had ever truly seen him. The next morning, Isawa gave Honda a package to deliver to a student named Akain, who hadn't been to school in a year. Plot twist of the century, the beast in front of him casually said, "That's me?" Honda was shook. Where was the cute little dude from the picture? Seeing Honda's confusion, Akain decided to share his tragic backstory. Back in the day, he was bullied relentlessly for having a pretty delicate face. The guys hated him for it. The girls despised him even more. Eventually, he just quit school altogether and locked himself in his room. But one day, after seeing a bodybuilding advert on TV, he decided enough was enough. He worked out like a man possessed, bulking up until he was strong enough to single-handedly take down the gang leaders in his neighborhood. Now, as an undefeated street fighting champion, Akain saw no reason to return to school. Not even the police could make him. Honda, unfazed, handed him the package and turned to leave. But Akain, dramatic as ever, completely misread the situation. He thought Honda was challenging him to a fight. Before he could throw a punch, though, a gang of street thugs ambushed them out of nowhere. Honda, still completely uninterested, simply walked away, handing Akain the package like it was his problem now. Akain, however, saw this as an act of divine intervention, a sign that Honda was fighting alongside him. Fueled by pure delusion, Akane demolished the thugs while hallucinating that Honda was his battle partner. One unfortunate thug made the mistake of trying to stop Honda. Big mistake. The moment he locked eyes with Honda's unsettlingly intense gaze, his soul left his body. The other gangsters instantly realized who they were dealing with. This was the Honda, the legend. Not wanting to risk their lives, they fled the scene. Akane, now in full admiration mode, opened the package and found an encouraging message from Honda. That was it. His heart was forever changed. The next morning, extra large edition. Akane finally returned to school. Isawa, understandably, struggled to process how this transformation had even happened, but Akane had already made a silent vow to protect Honda with his life. Later that day, it was time for practical cooking class. Kondo, the most aggressively average student in school, was absolutely terrified to realize he'd been grouped with Honda and a bunch of absolute lunatics. Not wanting to upset their mysterious overlord, Isawa and the others agreed to do all the work while Honda sat back like a king. But Kondo noticed something. Honda didn't look pleased. Was this really what he wanted? As everyone got started with their fancy recipes, Kondo kept an eye on Honda, who was busy creating what could only be described as culinary war crimes. The man was making pudding cups, but with the worst ingredients imaginable. Akane, witnessing the disaster unfold, nearly flipped the table in rage. But before he could unleash his fury, boom! Honda accidentally unleashed Hell's Inferno in the kitchen. Flames everywhere. Total chaos. The head chef, panicking, ordered the students to evacuate. But while Isawa and the others worried about Honda's safety, Kondo, absolute hero, grabbed a fire extinguisher and put out the flames. The guys, completely misunderstanding what had just happened, believed Honda had started the fire on purpose, not as an accident, but as a selfless act to prevent them from fighting. Overcome with emotion, they opened the fridge and grabbed the pudding cups he had made, convinced they were sacred artifacts. Kondo, watching in horror, tried to stop them. But it was too late. Even though the pudding tasted like actual suffering, Isawa and the others kept eating, because, in their eyes, everything Honda made was perfect. Later that day, a girl sitting next to Honda dropped her eraser, but instead of picking it up and returning it like a normal person, Honda, too socially anxious for basic interaction, just gave her a brand new eraser instead. This tiny act of kindness triggered something dangerous. Miyoko, the girl, fell hopelessly in love. Meanwhile, after class, Honda met up with his mate Kawafuji for a shopping trip. He was trying to buy paper for his next artistic masterpiece when a group of girls walked into the store. Naturally, instead of acting normal, Honda panicked and hid behind a shelf because God forbid anyone know he had a friend. When the coast was clear, he told Kawafuji that it would ruin his reputation if people knew they were mates. Meanwhile, Kawafuji was just standing there wondering what the hell he was on about. Their adventure continued at a cafe, where Honda was still ducking and diving to avoid being seen. Kawafuji finally snapped and told him to stop being ridiculous because he didn't care what people thought. Honda was genuinely touched by the sincerity of his only friend, completely unaware that Kawafuji was the entire reason for his warped personality in the first place. Back in middle school, Kawafuji had been heartbroken when the girl he liked asked him to deliver a love letter. Not to him, but to Honda. As revenge, Kawafuji told Honda that the girl had been spreading rumors about his millimeter Peter, and by the time he could say, "Just joking," the damage was already done. From that moment on, Honda believed that all girls were evil. The next day, Honda overheard some girls raving about a poem they bought from him at the park. But there was just one problem. He had never sold a poem in his life. Instead of clearing up the misunderstanding like a sensible person, Honda just stood there cringing as the girls posted the poem on the board. His fanboys, however, noticed something fishy about the handwriting and immediately launched an investigation. That night, they went to the park and caught a shady figure selling terrible poetry while pretending to be Honda. Infuriated, Akane punched the fraud right in the face, Ryo delivered some slaps for good measure, and Isawa grabbed a pair of scissors, ready to end this fool's cosplay career. Under immense pressure, the imposter, named Kei, confessed that he was Honda's biggest fan, and had dedicated his entire existence to copying his every move. Just then, two girls approached Kei, thinking he was the real deal, and invited him for some very adult activities. But before he could process what was happening, an entire army of fangirls swarmed in, desperate to get their hands on him. The pressure was too much. Kei ripped off his mask, revealing his absolutely tragic face and oversized beaver teeth. The fangirls recoiled in horror and immediately abandoned ship, while the guys were left standing there, mourning the utter humiliation of this grown man's existence. Back at school, Kei was forced to apologize, but when they entered the classroom, he found a note on the board from Honda himself. The message: "Get a life." Instead of taking the hint, Kei vowed to upgrade his Honda cosplay by getting braces to fix his beaver teeth. This man was determined. Meanwhile, outside, two senior girls were seconds away from jumping on Honda when they spotted him accepting a gift from a mysteriously gorgeous woman. Immediately, they assumed she was his girlfriend, snapped a photo, and within minutes, the entire school was in chaos. Honda had betrayed his fangirls. He had ditched his idol status for an older woman. The outrage was real. Back in class, Honda noticed some strange writing on his desk. When Isawa and the others checked, they realized it was a suicide note from one of his fangirls. And then, boom! A guy rushed in, shouting that Miyoko was about to jump from the highest floor of the building. The entire student body sprinted outside, desperate to stop this madness. But instead of a rational explanation, Miyoko burst into a full musical number, singing about how her life changed the day Honda gave her a new eraser. Apparently, her grades had plummeted because she spent every waking second thinking about his face. But now that Honda had betrayed her with another woman, there was no point in living anymore. She was seconds away from taking the plunge when she noticed Honda standing behind her. He had zero idea what was happening, but Miyoko just stood there, waiting for him to apologize. Instead, Honda started talking to his desk like it was a real person, telling it not to feel bad and that nothing could replace it. Miyoko, of course, assumed he was talking about her and immediately collapsed into tears. Convinced that life was still worth living, she came down safely and was embraced by her friends. Later that day, while crying by the fountain, she was approached by the mystery woman from earlier, who casually asked for directions to the PTA meeting. And just like that, Miyoko realized the older woman was Honda's mom. She sprinted back to school to spread the word, while Honda, completely unaware of the insanity that had just unfolded, was trapped in a meeting with his mom and teacher. Their master plan? Force him to actually talk to people. Socialize, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Determined to obey, Honda gave it a shot, but his classmates were convinced he was too perfect to be human, so they responded like weirdos. With no other choice, he zeroed in on Kondo, going full-on friendly mode, which unfortunately made him sound like a total creep. But hey, Kondo, being the saint he is, took it well, so Honda strutted home like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. After a short holiday, school was back in session. The vice principal caught two students loitering and gave them an earful, but the girls flipped the script, accusing him of trying to peek at their turkey slices instead. Right when things got awkward, student body president Miss Sako swooped in, threatening to expose the vice principal's secret OnlyFans account. The old man turned ghost and vanished. Sako was hailed as a hero by the girls, showered in gifts like some shoujo anime protagonist. But just as she basked in her glory, she spotted Honda and his crew passing by. Sako, a firm believer that all men are trash, seethed at how easily Honda attracted her female followers. Fueled by pure spite, she plotted his downfall. At the next student body meeting, Sako summoned two of the school's baddest senior girls and assigned them a mission: seduce Honda until he begged for mercy. The girls, ever the professionals, accepted the challenge. But just as they were about to pounce, Honda, in all his oblivious glory, stopped them mid-attack, telling them to focus on maintaining healthy bodies instead of trying to nibble on his bones. He was actually talking to some stray cats, but the girls took it as divine wisdom. Inspired, they abandoned their flirtatious ways and reported back to Sako, declaring that the mission was over. Fuming, Sako ordered her council to capture Honda. When he arrived, she laid down his punishment. He would wear a girl's uniform for the rest of the year. Honda, utterly confused, had no idea how he ended up in this mess. Meanwhile, the creepy student council vice president was fully on board, encouraging him to just embrace the cuteness. Refusing to be a public spectacle, Honda bolted, but Sako and her squad of skirt-wielding lunatics chased him down the hall. They finally cornered him, and in the struggle, Honda tripped down the stairs, directly onto Sako, in a scene straight out of a romance anime. When she came to, Sako was disgusted to find herself in such a compromising position, but her followers insisted that Honda had technically saved her life. In that moment, something terrible happened. Sako realized she might actually have feelings for the idiot. Mortified, she punched the vice president for flashing his treasures in public and stormed off. Just then, Isawa arrived to rescue Honda, only to find that their beloved school prince had lost most of his memories. Ryu and Akane were horrified as Honda waltzed around like a princess, oblivious to his usual humility. When they realized he now believed himself to be the most popular kid in school, Akane nearly cried. Desperate to fix things, Isawa suggested they speed up the recovery process. Meanwhile, Honda put his newfound charisma to the test, flirting with every girl he came across. Unfortunately, his charm backfired when he actually agreed to kiss them, because the real Honda would have rejected them like a tragic romance hero. Even Miyoko, the ever-enthusiastic creep, wanted in on the action, but Honda recoiled at her terrifying face. After some questionable research, Isawa concluded that the best cure for amnesia was a solid whack to the head. Seeing his chance, Akane snuck up behind Honda, ready to hammer him back to reality. Panicked, Honda dodged, but then Isawa and Ryu joined in, swinging their hammers like possessed carpenters. Cornered, Honda started hearing voices in his head, whispering that everyone was out to get him. Before the gang could go full whack-a-mole on him, he tripped, again, tumbling down the stairs like a poorly written gag character. When he finally got back up, his memories had miraculously returned. But now, convinced that the entire school was plotting his murder, he flashed Isawa and the others a sinister grin before walking away. Worried that Honda's life was spiraling into full-blown paranoia, Kawafuji dragged him out for some fun. To stay under the radar, Honda disguised himself as an ugly-ass lady named Hanzawa. Tagging along was Kawafuji's friend Hawa, and Honda nervously introduced himself under his new, ridiculous alias. As they hung out, Honda confided in Kawafuji, admitting that making new friends was terrifying. Kawafuji, ever the wise troll, encouraged him to just let loose. Meanwhile, Hawa was on a mission to win a legendary prize that required perfect scores in bowling, darts, and basketball. Honda, however, was sweating bullets, because sports? Not his strong suit. Honda, bless his socially awkward heart, tried to help out with bowling, but instead of impressing everyone, he just embarrassed himself so hard that even the bowling pins were cringing. Seeing this train wreck unfold, Kawafuji stepped in like a sports anime protagonist and casually scored 3 strikes in a row, proving once again that he was built different. Moving on to the next sport, Honda was determined to redeem himself, especially in front of Hawa. So, when Kawafuji completely flunked the darts game, Honda stepped up, pulled down his Dark Shades TM like a mysterious villain, and landed 3 bullseyes in a row. The crowd went wild. Okay, maybe just in his head. For the final event, basketball, Hawa took charge, sank a 3-pointer like it was nothing, and secured the grand prize for being an all-around sports beast. While Kawafuji went to grab some drinks, Hawa took this rare opportunity to bond with Honda, even offering to lend him some comic books. Honda, delighted at the thought of having a normal friendship for once, happily accepted. But of course, peace was never an option. A gang of high school punks from the basketball team shoved Hawa to the ground and snatched his hard-earned prize. And what did Honda do? Stand there like an NPC, watching the chaos unfold. But then, realizing that Kawafuji wasn't around to handle this mess, he ditched his Hanzawa disguise, transformed back into his usual self, and scared the absolute daylights out of the bullies. They practically threw Hawa's prize back at him before running for their lives. Hawa, still in shock, couldn't believe that Honda had actually stood up for him. So, when Kawafuji returned with the drinks, Hawa excitedly recounted the whole event like he had just witnessed a superhero origin story. However, he had completely forgotten about Hanzawa in the heat of the moment, and unknowingly told Kawafuji to pass his comic books to her, never realizing that Hanzawa and Honda were in fact the same person. Meanwhile, on the school's sports field, the athletes were training hard for an upcoming major league race. But no one could match the speed of the school's top runner, Kantaro-Hijiro. This guy was a legend. He had turned down an offer from the best school in the country just so he could stay back and settle an ancient grudge. And who was this grudge against? Honda, obviously. Turns out, Dash had once lost to Honda in a race back in middle school, and his fragile ego never recovered. Convinced that Honda had somehow cheated, Dash vowed to get his revenge one day. However, when he finally mustered up the courage to challenge Honda to a rematch, he chickened out at the last second and started crying like a toddler who just dropped his ice cream. Determined to help his whiny friend, Kei agreed to disguise himself as Honda and race in his place. The moment Kei put on the mask, Dash suddenly went Ultra Instinct, activating his inner speed demon and setting a record-breaking time on the track. However, even after this victory, he still wanted to challenge the real Honda. Since subtlety wasn't his strong suit, Dash and his team decided to literally start a fire in the school hallway, hoping it would scare Honda into running. But instead of sprinting away, Honda just pinched his nose, walked past the smoke like an unimpressed dad, and continued on his way. At this point, Dash's coach had had enough of his nonsense. She told him to stop obsessing over a pointless race and focus on leading his team to the nationals instead. Dash took her words to heart for about 5 minutes. The moment he saw Honda casually sprinting home like a character in a shonen anime, Dash completely forgot his life lessons and chased after him with everything he had. He finally managed to outrun Honda and was about to bask in his victory until he realized that Honda wasn't even racing. He was running away from something. That's when Dash turned around and, bam, got tackled by a very enthusiastic dog. The next day at school, Miyoko and her friend Sugi were killing time by reading palms. Sugi had actually gotten pretty good at predicting the future, so she wanted to take things up a notch. That's when she got an idea. She needed to read Honda's palm. The guys told her that Honda wasn't into that kind of stuff, but when he overheard them talking, he decided to help out by pretending to doze off at his desk. Sugi took the hint and got to work, but the moment she read his palm, she froze. What she saw was shocking. Honda had zero attributes of popularity or confidence. Instead, his palm practically screamed, "This man is living a sad and miserable life." But instead of exposing the brutal truth, she bluffed her way through it, telling the guys that Honda was destined to live like a lone wolf, conquering every obstacle in his path like a true gigachad. And then, just to mess with him, she threw in an extra prophecy. Honda was fated to have loads of kids with multiple baby mamas, just like a famous American rapper. The guys loved this prediction. They were already hyped for Honda's future superstar lifestyle. After all the fun and nonsense, reality hit hard when the midterm results were announced. Mr. Ama, their class teacher, handed out report cards and reminded everyone that there would be a makeup exam for those who failed. While most students were happy with their scores, Ryo and Akane looked like their souls had left their bodies. They had completely flunked. Determined to turn things around, the boys came up with a study plan, and Isawa proudly declared that their meeting place would be known as the Honda Force headquarters. Everyone was excited about the name, except for poor Kondu, who weakly protested that it was weird to create a club dedicated to Honda without even telling him. Naturally, the others ignored him. Meanwhile, Hawa casually flexed his report card, revealing that he had ranked first in the midterms. He promised to dedicate all his time to making sure Ryo and Akane passed the upcoming exam. Seeing Aizawa's ranking, the other students wondered what score Honda had gotten. Surely he must have ranked first. But Aizawa, ever the realist, pointed out that Honda might have deliberately messed up some questions just to avoid the attention. Classic Honda move. Determined to do their best for their beloved Honda, the boys vowed to ace their makeup exams. On the big day, all the students who had failed assembled in the classroom. Joining them were Dash and Kei, whose reasons for failing were spectacularly dumb. Dash, naturally, had prioritized running over studying, while Kei, true to his idiot tendencies, had written Honda instead of his own name on the answer sheet. His logic? He wanted to experience what it felt like to be the real Honda. As if that wasn't enough, Kei insisted on sitting in Honda's chair to absorb his legendary essence. But Dash wanted the seat too, sparking a ridiculous argument. Just as Rio and Payne stepped in to restore order, the room was hit with a plot twist. Honda himself walked in to take the makeup exam. The room collectively gasped. Mr. Aizawa told everyone to take their seats, but Rio and the others couldn't fathom why Honda, supposedly the smartest guy in class, would need to retake a test. The truth? Honda was just as much of a dumbass as the rest of them. He had forgotten to write his name on the original exam paper, so Mr. Aizawa had forced him to do it again. The exam began, but Honda wasn't writing. He was making weird, intense scratching noises with his pencil. Was he answering the test? No. He was absent-mindedly doodling. Naturally, the rest of the class, assuming he had unlocked some higher-level test-taking strategy, started copying him. Akane and the others scribbled away at lightning speed, filling in answers randomly just to mimic Honda's genius. When time was up, everyone handed in their papers with a deep sense of satisfaction. Later, Aizawa asked Rio and Akane how the test went. They were all smiles. It was great! Honda was there to guide us. The results came out the next day, and surprisingly, Akane and Rio had decent scores. They thanked Aizawa for his help, but he deflected the credit to Honda. Why? Because Honda had intentionally flunked the first exam just so he could be there to inspire the others who had actually failed. The legend of Honda continued to grow. Meanwhile, at the school library, Kasumi, a quiet girl with a massive crush on Honda, was in her element. The library had become nearly abandoned, but she didn't care. As long as Honda came in, the rest of the school could disappear for all she cared. Due to the library's lack of visitors, the school had cut its budget. But Kasumi, determined to keep Honda interested, bought romance novels with her own money and sneakily switched their covers to make them look like art books. Her cunning plan worked. Honda borrowed one, convinced it would help him with his drawing skills. Shortly after, Aizawa and the others walked into the library, hoping to find Honda. While looking for books, Akane accidentally knocked over the stack of novels Kasumi had bought. She freaked out, defending the books like they were her own children. Rio, being the drama queen she was, immediately figured it out. She bought these romance novels for Honda. She wants to make him fall in love with her. Kasumi, in full delusional mode, started fantasizing about a world where Honda was her Prince Charming. The group, feeling inspired or just entertained by her madness, decided to help her upgrade the library. They gathered books of all genres, turning the place into the ultimate reading hub. Word spread, and soon, students flooded the newly dubbed Gen Z library. Kasumi should have been thrilled, except for one small problem. Honda could no longer visit because it was too crowded. Later, when Honda returned the book, he casually mentioned that the cover didn't match the contents. Kasumi nervously asked if he enjoyed it. To her delight, Honda said he was impressed by her dedication to her job. In that moment, Kasumi ascended to another plane of existence. However, guilt crept in, and she announced that she would start ordering books for everyone in school, except him. Honda misinterpreted this as a lifetime ban from the library and left feeling rejected. When he told his friend Kawafuji what happened, Kawafuji gave him a deadpan look and said, "You absolute idiot. She likes you." Honda: "Eh?" Kawafuji: "Don't worry about it. She's ugly anyway." Meanwhile, Sugihara was trying to convince Honda to join the class field trip. It's a great chance to meet new people. Honda, against his better judgment, agreed. Meanwhile, at another school, a group of students was struggling to decide their holiday plans. Their leader, a popular guy named Itami, suggested a field trip. Fate was setting up something chaotic. On the train ride, Rio handed out sweets to share among the students. Honda, attempting to be normal for once, took a piece. But the second he realized everyone was watching, he immediately spat it out. The students were baffled. Just then, 3 students from Shiro High walked into their cabin. Akane, smelling trouble, immediately stood up and blocked their path. "Oi, get lost!" As they were talking, Honda threw his candy at the buff guy Jimoto, who squared up to Honda, ready to throw hands over the candy that had landed in his hair. The tension in the train cabin skyrocketed. But before Jimoto could introduce Honda's face to his fist, Hikima stepped in like a knight in shining armor. Well, more like a well-groomed, overly charismatic prince, making the girls around them swoon as if he'd just proposed to each of them individually. Isawa leaned over to Akane and whispered that Amaya, aka Mr. Popular from Shiro High, was basically their school's Honda. But actually respected and admired on purpose. Upon arriving at the field trip site, the students were given the freedom to explore. But naturally, Honda and his crew found themselves drawn to a fortune-teller's tent. Everyone was eager to hear what fate had in store for their beloved Honda, but before the fortune could even be read, Shiro High's students rudely barged in. Determined to humiliate Honda in front of Amaya, they rigged the fortune slips so that Amaya's was practically dripping with divine blessings, while Honda's might as well have read, "Better luck next life." That night, after everyone had retreated to their rooms, Honda's crew was rudely awakened by a creepy doll that fell in through their window. Akane, ever the hothead, immediately suspected Shiro High's gang and was ready to retaliate. However, when they turned to Honda for guidance, they found him snoring peacefully. Taking this as a sign of supreme wisdom or supreme obliviousness, they decided to let it go and went back to sleep. The next day, Honda stumbled upon Amaya leading a group of hopeless romantics on a scenic tour. Because Honda had the curiosity of a cat and the social awareness of a potato, he followed them without a second thought. When the girls begged Amaya for a photo, he graciously agreed. But when it was Honda's turn, Amaya handed him a ridiculous costume to wear, pretending it was part of the fun. Meanwhile, in a stroke of petty genius, one of Amaya's minions stuck a piece of candy in Honda's hair, getting revenge for Jimoto's candy incident on the train. Luckily, Kondo arrived just in time to help unglue his hair from the fabric before things got any more embarrassing. Later that night, Honda and Kondo visited a gift shop where Honda became enamored with a stylish pen. In his attempt to grab it from under a table, he somehow managed to get his arm stuck like he was in a budget adult movie. Jimoto and his crew spotted him and, surprisingly, helped him out before realizing who he was. Kondo, acting on pure survival instinct, shoved Honda away before they caught on. When the Shiro High guys asked if they'd seen Honda, Kondo pointed at some random guy in the distance, buying them just enough time to escape. Then, when Kamichi showed up looking for trouble, Kondo panicked and shoved a trash bag over Honda's head, turning him into an unwilling piece of human rubbish. Kamichi, still obsessed with proving Shiro High's superiority, warned Kondo to stay out of their rivalry, but Kondo defended Honda, insisting that he wasn't a bad guy, just an idiot. Kamichi naturally ignored him, looking forward to seeing whether Amaya or Honda would come out on top in this absurd popularity war. The next day, Amaya approached Honda and asked if he ever got tired of living up to people's expectations. Honda, confused as ever, simply replied, "What expectations?" Amaya offered a handshake, suggesting they become friends, but Honda refused, saying it would be weird being friends with someone that popular. Instead, he declared that he already had great friends. His words hit Amaya like a philosophical slap in the face, making him realize he had been treating his own friends as underlings instead of equals. Moved, he apologized to his classmates for being a self-absorbed diva. Kamichi, however, wasn't ready to let the rivalry die. Fueled by pure pettiness, he lunged at Honda, but Kondo, acting purely on instinct, delivered a world-class slap to Kamichi's face. Amaya immediately apologized for his friend's behavior and called off the feud between their schools. Unfortunately, while all this was happening, nobody noticed that Honda had somehow ended up floating face down in a nearby lake. Back at school, Mr. Ama was devastated after the board banned frog dissections due to excessive complaints from parents. Furious at this gross injustice, he sought out Honda and Isawa, asking them to collect signatures to reinstate the dissections. Despite not being particularly fond of the activity himself, Honda lacked the courage to say no, so he found himself roped into the mission. When they addressed the class, opinions were split, but when Honda, in all his unintentional charismatic glory, said he'd participate, everyone caved and signed the petition. On dissection day, Mr. Ama was so overjoyed that he attempted to hug Honda, who immediately fumbled his frog, causing total chaos. One frog's escape led to another, and soon the classroom was overrun with leaping amphibians, sending students screaming in every direction. Amidst the chaos, the teacher noticed Akane bleeding, claiming he was injured. Everyone fell silent as Honda, seemingly possessed by a frog spirit, began speaking in a deeply philosophical voice about the cruelty of dissection. Deeply moved, the entire class, including the teacher, agreed to set the frogs free, replacing the lesson with flower collecting instead. As the frogs hopped back into the wild, Mr. Ama realized that his original goal had been to teach kindness through dissection, but the students had learned it in their own way without harming a single frog. Meanwhile, Honda, who had passed out mid-prophecy, woke up in the clinic, completely oblivious to his newfound status as the Frog Whisperer. When school was finally over, Honda headed home like a normal student. But Isawa? Oh no, he decided to go full-on ninja mode, secretly tailing him to make sure he got home safely. However, just a few minutes in, Honda suddenly bolted like he was being chased by debt collectors. Naturally, Isawa assumed, completely unironically, that someone was stalking Honda. You know, even though he was literally the one creeping in the shadows. Back at the ultra-secret Honda Force headquarters, which was probably just someone's garage, Isawa shared his suspicions with the team, and they devised a foolproof strategy to catch this so-called stalker. The next day, the squad split into two groups, strategically hiding along the various paths leading to Honda's house, ready to trap the culprit from all angles. Genius. Absolute tactical masterminds. Luckily for Isawa and Kondo, Honda took the route they were covering. They crept after him like stealthy operatives, until Kondo had a light bulb moment and suggested they just walk with him. You know, to avoid looking like the stalkers themselves. But Isawa, ever the dramatic, reminded him that the Honda Force only operates from the shadows. As they bickered about their incredibly professional methods, a rustling sound in the bushes snapped them to attention. The stalker? Time to strike. But just as they were about to go full WWE, out popped Miyoko from the bush. Kondo immediately labeled her the stalker because, well, she looked suspicious. Isawa, however, revealed the truth. Miyoko wasn't the stalker. She was actually part of their elite protection squad. Her new alias? Eraser. Why? Because she had taken it upon herself to erase any girl who got too obsessed with Honda. Permanently. No one questioned how far this went, and frankly, it's better that way. Meanwhile, Kasumi was innocently heading to Honda's house to deliver some freshly ordered romance novels, as one does. But the moment Miyoko spotted her, she instantly lassoed her up like a professional cowgirl, ensuring she wouldn't get anywhere near Honda. The dedication was unmatched. Over on the other side of town, Yuki and Isawa were still on Honda's tail. Until they weren't. The guy suddenly went full Olympic sprinter and left them in the dust. Thinking fast, Isawa unleashed his secret weapon, a powerful whistle, summoning Dash, the fastest member of their squad. Surely he could catch up, right? Wrong. Even Dash, with all his speed, returned defeated. Nope, can't do it. The guy's a machine, he admitted, utterly crushed. As they regrouped, Ryu and Akane arrived looking like they'd just crawled out of a war zone. Turns out, they had been ambushed. The supposed stalker had tricked them, locked them in a dog cage, and then set an angry mutt on them. It was a level of humiliation they would never recover from. Just as they were devising a new plan, Honda, who had been desperately trying to escape, attempted to leap over a fence, only to land right in front of them. He stared. They stared. A moment of pure, undiluted awkwardness. Finally, Honda had it. He snapped, yelling at them to quit following him around like a bunch of lunatics. He was late to meet his only real friend. That last line shattered the Honda Force's collective delusion. For the first time, Kondo realized they were the actual stalkers. But Isawa? Oh, Isawa was too far gone. Nonsense! The real stalker must still be out there, he declared, rallying the troops to keep searching. Later that day, Kondo noticed people whispering about him, and naturally, this made him very self-conscious. Desperate for a confidence boost, he turned to Ryu for help. Ryu, being the charismatic one, invited him to hang out with some girls, but Kondo wasn't interested. He preferred the company of books. As he sat down to read, he noticed a letter on his desk. A love letter, with a heart-shaped sticker. Kondo's soul ascended. Could this be it? His time to shine? The sender was a girl named Maki, who asked him to meet her behind the gym after school. Of course, his friends had wildly different takes on the situation. Akain, ever the fighter, declared, "It's a challenge. Prepare to fight for your life." Meanwhile, Isawa, with his encyclopedic knowledge of the school's hierarchy, confirmed it was a love letter, but added that Maki was, at best, a 5 out of 10. Rude. Ryu, being the ultimate wingman, told Kondo to celebrate. This was going to be the biggest day of his life. They styled his hair, hyped him up, and even suggested he bring flowers to make the moment extra romantic. As Kondo strutted towards his destiny, he noticed everyone staring at him. Ah yes, his newfound popularity. He must be radiating Honda Force energy. And then, Maki absolutely obliterated him. She took one look at him and said, with zero hesitation, "You're just an average student. Stop pretending you're part of the Honda Force. No girl would ever love you." Fatality. It was a direct arrow to the heart. Kondo's very soul shut down. His friends immediately rushed to his side, trying every trick in the book to cheer him up. But to their shock, Kondo smiled. "I always knew it would end this way," he muttered, embracing his tragic fate like a true anime protagonist. "There was never a chance in hell that an average guy like me could end up with someone as hot as Maki." He tried, to keep his composure. But in the end, the heartbreak was too much. He snapped, turned on his heel, and ran for his life. His friends, realizing he was definitely not okay, immediately bolted after him. And just like that, Kondo was left questioning everything, including whether or not he should even stay in the Honda Force. Our boy Kondo literally collides with Honda, who immediately recognizes him as the menace that bulldozed him during the field trip. But before Honda can unleash his inner grudge, Kondo spots the flowers in his hand and asks what he plans to do with them. And what does Honda say? Harass people. Yep, that's his master plan. Obviously, Kondo sees right through his wannabe tough guy act and hands him a gift card as an apology for the previous assault. Honda continues on his way, bumping into his mates, who are relieved to see him acting normal again. Little do they know, Honda's weird, socially awkward energy actually makes Kondo feel better about himself. But just when you think all is well, disaster strikes. Honda opens the gift card, smudges the letters, and bam! It now reads Jackass. Convinced Kondo pranked him, Honda levels up his hatred for him. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit lair of degeneracy, a group of artistic gentlemen known as the Hentai Comic Club are hard at work, drawing manga of cute girls. Only cute girls. Their problem? No one's buying their masterpieces. Enter Isawa, who storms in to inform them that due to their undisputed uselessness, the student council is cutting their funding. Horrified, the lads beg for mercy, but Isawa drops the truth bomb. They've made zero profit. Pointing at a mountain of unsold manga, he suggests a genius marketing move. Make a manga about Honda, the school's most popular guy. The club members are intrigued but face one major dilemma. It's against their sacred rules to draw anything other than cute girls. Then, the resident chonk of the group suggests the unthinkable, turning Honda into a cute girl. Revolutionary. But they hit a new roadblock. They've barely observed Honda because, well, the guy has no mates. So, their brilliant leader Neo declares that each of them will conduct their own Honda research and create their own version of the manga. The best one gets published. Neo, being the absolute genius he is, corners Honda in the hallway and whips out a doll in a bikini. Yes, this is his plan. He dramatically waves the doll around, attempting to seduce Honda into revealing his true nature. Honda, utterly confused but polite, compliments the doll's beauty. Encouraged, Neo pushes the experiment further, urging him to remove her skirt. Big mistake. Honda, being the chivalrous gentleman he is, immediately covers the doll with his napkin, saying all women should be treated with respect. This spiritual enlightenment hits Neo like a truck-kun, making him realize he's been treating his beloved doll like a cheap floozy. Overcome with guilt, he vows to create a decent manga about Honda to honor his purity. A week later, the club members assemble for the legendary manga reveal. Fat Joe presents his manga the others were shocked to see, a scandalous version of female Honda with her plot armor wide open. Neo, furious at this sacrilege, launches a punch straight at Captain Eyepatch. But before Neo can fully restore honor, Daddy Diabetes returns fire with a punch of his own. Then, the smallest lad, Taki, unveils his sci-fi intergalactic love story featuring Honda. Neo hates it. Another punch. Neo then delivers a heartfelt speech, begging them to embrace actual storytelling instead of just jiggly body parts. The lads, realizing they've been enlightened by Neo's artistic brilliance, agree his version is the best. And then disaster strikes again. In a tragic turn of fate, the manga accidentally gets tossed out by Honda with the rubbish. The lads are devastated. Their masterpiece is gone. But just when all hope seems lost, someone zooms past them at inhuman speed. It's Honda. Yes, the man himself, sprinting after the garbage truck like his life depends on it. Miraculously, he stops the truck and helps them sift through the rubbish. Then, fate delivers the final blow. Honda accidentally picks up one of their prototype pages. His eyes widened in absolute horror. Why? Because it features himself, in female form, with a scandalous design. His soul leaves his body. A few months had passed, and it was almost time for the next school festival. Naturally, the ever-dramatic student council president, Sawaka, decided to kick off the celebration with an earth-shattering announcement, renaming the entire event to the Honda Festival. To absolutely no one's surprise, the students were not on board with this blatant display of fangirling. Despite Sawaka's half-hearted excuses, everyone knew she was just trying to impress her beloved Honda. Meanwhile, Isawa rallied his classmates, determined to win the festival's best award. Ryo, ever the visionary, suggested they all dress up as maids, because why not? While Akane countered with a far more aggressive proposal, a boxing tournament. However, the girls had their hearts set on a Romeo and Juliet performance, and Ryo quickly jumped on board because apparently he'd always dreamed of playing Juliet. Kondo understandably had some questions. Since no one could settle on an idea, the ultimate decision was dumped on Honda, because what better way to determine the fate of an entire class than letting their most confused member choose? The pressure was too much, and when Kondo tried to help by suggesting a fourth option, Honda's brain short-circuited. In a moment of panic, he blurted out that he wanted a game where boys dressed up as girls. Cue. The girls losing their minds with excitement. Realizing his slip-up, Honda noped out of there, sprinting away in sheer terror. While contemplating his escape route on the stairwell, Sawako found him and dished out some wise advice. Be more of a dictator and just choose what he wanted without worrying about others. But Honda was too distracted by her suddenly different hairstyle to absorb any of it. Before he knew it, she roped him into painting festival murals for free. With newfound determination and exhaustion from painting, Honda stormed back to his classroom, arms wide open, ready to announce his decision, only to find the room empty. Apparently, the class had already decided without him. The next day, when Honda attempted to help out, Isawa casually told him to sit down and chill. Honda, being the overthinker he is, took this as a sign that they were plotting to keep him out of the way. His suspicions were confirmed when his classmates left him alone at school, not even bothering to wake him up. As he sulked, staring at a cat, a gang of thugs appeared, ready to beat him up. But before things could get ugly, the Honda force arrived to defend their beloved leader. The casting for Romeo and Juliet was peak madness. Ryo bagged the role of Romeo, while Akaine took on Juliet, meaning Romeo was now at risk of being crushed under Juliet's large frame. Honda realized, to his absolute horror, that he'd been cast as a commoner with zero dialogue. That's right, no lines, no grand entrance, just a flying space rock. When he questioned Isawa about his tragic role, the guy just smirked and told him to sit tight because they had something special planned for him. Special? That was never a good sign. Meanwhile, the girls were sacrificing chunks of their own hair to make a wig for Honda's character. And the boys were busy perfecting their Honda impressions, which was basically just them dramatically overreacting to everything. But Honda wasn't amused. He wanted to join in on the festival fun. Finally, the festival kicked off. Over at the artwork section, Kawafuji and Keisuwa were checking things out when they decided to swing by Honda's class performance. They grabbed some drinks and settled in for what they assumed would be a normal Romeo and Juliet play. Oh, how wrong they were. The curtain rose, and bam! Rio was Romeo, Anne was Juliet, and as they embraced, the audience quickly realized one crucial detail. Juliet was about to crush Romeo under her sheer size. Instead of panic, though, the crowd leaned into the chaos, breaking into spontaneous musical numbers like this was some sort of Broadway fever dream. Just when things couldn't get any weirder, King Lear appeared, looking absolutely done with the nonsense, and dropped some philosophical wisdom bombs. Juliet, clearly moved by his words, promptly dropped Romeo and downed an entire bottle of poison. Classic Shakespearean drama. Romeo woke up, saw his dead beloved, and was heartbroken. The audience urged him to move on and heal, but Romeo had zero interest in emotional growth, so he decided to die too. But hold up, a character from a completely different story accidentally crossed into the wrong universe and interrupted the whole thing, causing reality to glitch out. Somehow, this resurrected Juliet, who immediately tried to restrain Romeo from following through with his dramatic demise. Then, surprise! Queen Elizabeth herself made an entrance to restore order, as one does. Kawafuji was completely floored when he realized that Honda was the one playing the Imperial Queen of England. Honda, for his part, was losing his mind on stage. He had zero lines, zero clue what was happening, and 100% embarrassment because Kawafuji was watching. If there were a hole in the ground, Honda would have gladly yeeted himself into it. Unable to take it anymore, Honda bolted off stage with a rabid crowd of his fans chasing after him. And just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, bam! Thugs from Kiro High rolled up looking for him. Honda, blissfully unaware of the danger, was off snacking in a quiet corner while these gangsters terrorized students, demanding his location. But instead of finding the real Honda, they were met with an army of Honda clones, because apparently everyone wanted in on this madness. Their leader, Rai, managed to grab Kei and threatened to chop his balls off if he didn't spill the truth. Kei, ever the loyal friend, swore on his life that he'd never betray Honda. And then Dash immediately ratted Honda out like a certified dumbass. As the thugs rushed to their new target, Sugi stepped in with her mystic fortune-telling skills. She took one look at Rai's palm and declared, with all the drama of a horror movie, that his entire future was nothing but darkness. That was all it took. Rai and his boys noped out of there so fast, you'd think they saw a ghost. When Miyoko and Kasumi heard that a bunch of thugs were after Honda, they didn't even hesitate. They were ready to throw hands and unleash some festival justice. Meanwhile, Kei met up with Awa and the others, looking like he had just run a marathon. He breathlessly warned them that Rai and his gang of discount villains had found Honda's location. Meanwhile, IKEA and his crew strolled into the festival, hyped to watch the Romeo and Juliet show. But backstage? Oh, backstage was chaos. Honda, bless his innocent soul, was brainstorming ways to make his role more interesting instead of just sitting around dressed like someone's nan. Then, Rai and his gang arrived, stomping through the festival looking for Honda like he owed them money. But joke's on them. Honda was hiding inside the castle prop like a medieval Rapunzel. He heard their voices and, thinking the play had already started, began rehearsing his lines with dramatic flair, completely unaware of the impending doom outside. The thugs, now getting impatient, were loitering about when Amaya and his crew rolled up. And let me tell you, tension skyrocketed faster than a shonen power-up. Then, out of nowhere, Chimoto lost all self-control and clocked one of the thugs right in the face, instantly triggering an all-out brawl. Meanwhile, Honda, still blissfully unaware, covered his ears, waiting for his cue to go on stage. But then Isawa and the others kicked the door open with a dramatic bang, and Honda panicked. Thinking this was his grand entrance, he burst out of the fake castle with a heroic "Enough!" only to realize he had read the room completely wrong. Embarrassed, he yeeted himself back inside, leaving everyone feeling kinda bad for him. But plot twist, Rai and his gang weren't actually here to fight. Nope, they were here to surrender. Turns out, ever since Honda traumatized them in front of Akani's house, they had lost their will to be street thugs. Now, instead of ruling the streets, they wanted to pledge their loyalty to Honda. Meanwhile, IKEA and his guys also apologized for throwing hands over, well, absolutely nothing. But just as everyone was reaching a touching resolution, they noticed Rai lying on the ground, knocked out cold. Why? Because Miyoko and her new apprentice had taken matters into their own fists. Fast forward to the evening, and the festival was wrapping up. Sako took center stage to thank everyone for making the event a chaotic masterpiece and announced the festival awards. First up, the Best School Club Award. And the winner? The Hentai Comic Club, for selling a mind-blowing 5,000 copies of their Honda manga in a single day. Then came the big one, Best Class Performance. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, and Sako finally announced the winner, Honda's class. Our boy Honda was supposed to step forward and accept the award, but the man was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Just as he was about to claim his victory, Kawafuji stormed in, demanding the award for his class instead, claiming their performance was obviously superior. Sako, unfazed, plopped the crown right on Honda's head and declared, "This belongs to no one else but him." But Kawafuji wasn't having it. He turned to Honda and went full manipulative bestie mode. "Come on, man, I'm your only real friend. Just hand it over." The crowd? Oh, they were livid. They started rioting like they were about to overthrow a corrupt government. Honda, naturally, assumed they were all out to humiliate him again. But Kawafuji made him take a good, hard look at the crowd, and that's when Honda realized they weren't mocking him. They were actually cheering for him. Mind blown. With this newfound epiphany, Honda removed the crown and announced that it belonged to everyone at the festival. And I kid you not, his words were so pure and inspiring that the entire arena lit up like someone had just activated Ultra Instinct. Sako, clearly impressed, revealed Honda's grand prize, a massive parade float dedicated entirely to him. But instead of being flattered, Honda was thoroughly creeped out by how much his school seemed to worship him. Isawa and the others hyped him up to ride the float like a true festival king, but just as Honda was about to do it, he noticed something horrifying. The float was on fire. If he had taken their advice, he might have literally gone out in flames. But instead of freaking out, everyone watched the burning float with admiration, claiming it was a majestic phoenix rising in its glorious demise. And honestly, iconic. The next day at school, Honda, for the first time, felt like he truly belonged. He finally connected with his classmates and made some real friends.